Buddha, A Story of Enlightenment, Deepak Chopra. Author's note: whoever sees me, sees the teaching, Buddha. In writing this book, I took a deep breath and created new characters and incidents in the life of one of the most famous people who ever lived. Famous, but still very obscure. I wanted to bring Buddha out of the mists of time, to fill him out in flesh and blood, and yet preserve his mystery. Fact blended into fantasy centuries ago in the story of the prince who became a living god. Or is God the very thing he didn't want to be? Was his deepest wish to disappear from the material world remembered only as an inspiration of perfection? The Buddha story, as it gathered momentum for 2 millennia, became chock full of miracles and gods that got stuck onto its surface. Speaking about himself, Buddha never mentioned miracles or gods. He held a doubtful view of both. He showed no interest in being revered as a personality. None of his many sermons mentions his family life or gives much personal information at all. Unlike Christ in the New Testament, he certainly didn't see himself as divine. Instead, he saw himself as someone who is awake, which is what the word Buddha means. That's the person I've tried to capture in this book. Here, in all his mystery, is the principal human being who ever gained enlightenment, who spent his long life trying to wake up the rest of us. Everything he knew from arduous, sometimes bitter experience. He went through extreme suffering, almost to the death, and emerged with something incredibly precious. Buddha literally became the truth. Whoever sees me sees the teaching, he said, and whoever sees the teaching sees me. I wrote this book as a sacred journey, fictionalized in many of its externals, but psychologically true, I hope, to what the seeker's path feels like. In all 3 phases of his life, Siddhartha, the prince, Gautama, the monk, and Buddha, the compassionate one, he was as mortal as you and I. Yet he attained enlightenment and was raised to the rank of an immortal. The miracle is that he got there following a heart as human as yours and mine, and just as vulnerable. Part 1. Siddhartha the Prince. Chapter 1. The Kingdom of Sakya, 563 BCE. One crisp spring day, King Suddhodana turned in his saddle to survey the battlefield. He needed a weakness to exploit, and he was confident the enemy had left one for him. They always did. His senses were close to everything else. Screams of the wounded and dying were heightened by the hoarse commands of his officers, bellowing orders or calling on the gods for help. Torn by horses' hooves and elephants' feet, cut by iron-rimmed chariot wheels, the land oozed blood as if the earth itself were mortally wounded. "More soldiers! I want more foot soldiers now!" Suddhodana didn't wait for anyone to obey. "If any man within the sound of my voice runs away, I will kill him personally." Charioteers and infantry moved toward the king, battered figures so filthy with fighting they could have been demiurges fashioned from the mud of the field. Suddhodana was a warrior king, and the first thing to know about him is this: he mistook himself for a god. Along with his army, the king would kneel in the temple and pray before he went to war, but he put no trust in divine help. Leaving the gates of the capital behind, Suddhodana turned his head for one last look at home. But as the miles lengthened from Kapilavastu, his mood changed. By the time he came to the battlefield, its roiling activity and the smells that assaulted his nostrils, straw and blood, soldiers' sweat and dying horses, carried Suddhodana into another world. It smothered him completely in the belief that he could never lose. The present campaign wasn't of his doing. Ravi Santanam, a northern warlord along the Nepalese border, had taken one of Suddhodana's trade caravans in a surprise attack. Suddhodana's